We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello, listeners, and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your place for all things MCU. And unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know that this week, the first 2 episodes of Agatha All Along premiered. So this is our somewhat belated reactions to those first 2 episodes since we were actually on vacation when they premiered. Before we dive into the episode, though, some of you may know this if you are following along with our Sister Scoop episodes, but we do now have a Buy Me a Coffee, so that is linked below if you would like to help support the show in any way that you feel makes sense for you. We would be greatly appreciated, but did just want to announce that for anybody who's not necessarily listening to our weekly Sister Scoops and just listening to the podcast. Now y'all know, and you can find the link below. All right, now that that is out of the way, Katie, why don't you start us off with your initial reactions to the first 2 episodes of Agatha All Along?
I really, really liked it. And I'm going to already just throw this out. You all know I always say that about like the first episode usually, because the first episode I feel is almost always good. Same with the second. And then by the end of the series, I'm eating all my words again. So I'm very weary about saying that I like it, but I do like it. I think first, just to kind of give an overall with the first episode, I really enjoyed them being in her head of what she's experiencing while she's still in the spell. So I thought that was really interesting. I was really into the whole little like detective thing going on. I honestly could have just watched a whole show based off of that. I'm not going to lie. Took me a second to remember what I was watching. But I also really like they brought back all of those people from WandaVision, which I don't know if I should have been expecting it. I probably should have. But I really enjoyed that they brought them back because it was such a great callback to the fact that she is still in Westview. And so I really enjoyed that. I liked the transition out of her mind and out of the spell. I thought it was very seamless. And then we went right into the whole let's get a coven together. And again, I think it was just a very seamless transition. And the first 2 episodes were really solid.
Yeah, a few things to say off of that. One, I'm a little confused about the whole detective part. Was that just in her head or was that like real? Because I think that was just in her head, right?
So my understanding was, yes, it was just in her head, but in all of that, she was still acting fairly normal to the people around her because that was her conversation with Herb.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, when she walked out and she's naked and stuff, and he was like, well, you've been a fine neighbor. You've just been kind of weird the past few days. So my understanding is she was in the spell in her head, but she's almost subconsciously been going about the motions of being a very normal person to everybody else.
Cool. That's kind of where I was going, but I wasn't sure if they just kind of thought she was like that weirdo neighbor who's just like a little off and kind of living in her own fantasy. But yeah, I agree. I definitely think that it was a very strong couple of episodes. It really did a good job of seamlessly also tying into WandaVision, to your point. I liked how we got to see exactly how even at a top level, all of these people were so affected by Wanda's spell. And I know we'll talk about Mrs. Hart later because we had so many thoughts about her in the predictions episode. So we'll get to that in a second. But her especially, I think, when we saw that that's not even her real name and like all this stuff and like just how different the real, what is it, Mrs. Davis is from the Mrs. Hart that kind of Wanda developed or created for the spell in Westview. So I loved that element too of seeing how Westview is trying to return to some semblance of normalcy after they all literally had their minds hijacked. I think it's also important to note that they actually, for the first time in a very long time, Marvel has given us a specific amount of time between two properties. So it is said multiple times throughout, I believe, both episodes that it's been 3 years since the whole Westview incident, aka WandaVision. So it's good to know, like, obviously we knew it was after WandaVision, but to have a very clear stake in the ground and say, all right, it's been 3 years. Well, now, depending on how this show shapes up and how other things maybe relate to it in the future, we might be able to use this as a really good guiding post for other properties and other timelines and give more concrete timing, like we've been complaining about, to other properties throughout the MCU, since we haven't really gotten a lot of that in the post-Endgame era.
I think it was also smart because this is a sequel. This is one of the first times a show has gotten a sequel that's not its own show, if that makes sense. Loki season 2 was the first time a show got a sequel within itself, but this is based off of WandaVision, the events of WandaVision. We said it in the predictions. Maybe go back and watch it if you haven't seen it since 2021. Maybe go back and watch the last few episodes if you are vaguely more familiar with it, have seen it. Just catch yourself up. Kind of remember what happened at the end there. I think it's very interesting that this is where they're choosing to be so clear as well. And I think it's smart. I think it's very smart because you need it. You need, especially a sequel, to be more clear. I'm pretty sure Loki season 2 pretty much picks up right after Loki season 1. That was pretty clear there. So it is important in these sequel type of things to tell the timeline. And they did make it clear. They made it clear when, I think even when she was talking to Herb, whatever. But I'm pretty sure he said it. I know some of the other witches were saying it. She said it at some point, Agatha, that she'd been gone for 3 years. Pretty sure Aubrey Plaza's character,
Rio.
I wanted to say Vio, but it's Rio Vidal. That's why. And she said it, I'm pretty sure, at one point. So they make it clear, and I think it is smart. And to your point then about more projects down the way, I do want to mention, I'm pretty sure they confirmed this also takes place after the Marvels.
Oh, interesting.
So I do think we actually got another time blocker. I'm not 100% sure the significance yet on why it's important for us to know that this takes place after that, other than Monica, obviously. But I'm pretty sure I saw somewhere on the internet that has been confirmed as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is weird considering they're focusing on two very different aspects of the MCU, right? You have the space multiverse with the Marvels and then very much magic, which has not really been focused on this, at least Agatha so far. Obviously, WandaVision had multiversal implications, but Agatha All Along so far really has been very focused on the witchcraft elements and not so much the larger multiverse. That may change. I'm not sure that I really think it will, but there's always that possibility. I do want to start talking. You mentioned how they seamlessly kind of worked its way into the Witches' Road. And I want to talk about the witches because that was something that we did a whole separate episode on. And to your point, I like that they didn't beat around the bush. Like they gave 2 episodes. We got 1 episode to kind of set the scene. And the second episode, they were immediately diving into the action and setting up the next however many episodes there are. I'm a little confused because they're also putting 8 and 9 together, I think. So I guess there's 9 episodes, but 6 weeks. It's a little confusing. Anyway, they're setting up the rest of the episodes, and I thought that was paced really well. But I thought that something that was also interesting because we talked about it, like why would these witches want to work with Agatha Harkness, knowing her reputation as a witch? They call her at one point, I think, the most notorious witch in North America, which is hilarious. But it was interesting to see the way that she was able to show these witches who are kind of down on their luck, like, hey, your best option really is to go with me on this witch's road because you're either facing eviction or facing legal issues, or you want to find out about your mom. And like, I also thought that her manipulation powers, not really powers, but her manipulation skills were kind of on full display as she was gathering her coven in a way that was very Agatha, but not very kind.
I also thought it was great how they did it, because I think I was a little weary. Remember, we knew these witches were all coming, but it's really hard to sit there and think, great, we have to be introduced to all these new characters. Especially in this realm, we were not being introduced to a town or whatever. Agatha was going to look for a coven. She needed a coven. There were two ways, I should say, that this could have gone. And I think it went the really seamless and easy way, in which we saw all of them. We understood their backstory. We were very quickly introduced to the type of witch they were, which I think is going to be very important for us to know as we go throughout all of this. So I think, we check off 3 boxes right from the start with all of them, but it's not taking forever. I think she's with them for less than 5 minutes in that episode, each of them. And she's pretty much like, hey, come by my place at this time if you're in. And that's it. And so I think it was really great how they did it, because you kind of get the rundown of them. You get who they are. You get why they are also coming on the Witch's Row, kind of to what you were saying. And I think that was really great. I want to quickly pivot slightly, since we are talking about the members of this coven. Well, Teen, which we have to call him for the time being, is the person who gets her to want to go on the road again because he wants to go on the road. This was kind of something we were talking about in the predictions. This is the big impetus for this entire show at this point, is that he helps break her out of the spell with the help of Rio, but he helps break her out of the spell because he needs her help to go on the Witch's Road. He wanted to go. And I wanted to talk through this with you because I didn't fully understand his reasoning for going. He's already a warlock, is what I assume they're going to be called. Usually that's how that goes. So he has the power, but to me, I thought he was saying he wanted more power. Like, I was a little unsure about his motive there.
Yeah, I think that was the guess, not really even guess. That was kind of what I was picking up when they were putting it down, if you will. Like, he kind of has no more than maybe a few parlor tricks. So he has, at some point, it's interesting, obviously, knowing his mother.
Or assumed mother.
Yeah. But let's put that all aside. He has some magic in his lineage at some point, right? And it's just been diluted, essentially. I wouldn't be surprised if the same spell that prevents him from saying his actual name is actually blocking some of his magic so that his assumed mother can control that element as well. But all of that aside, let's say his magic is a little diluted. He really can only do, move a few things, maybe this and that. And he wants to have kind of that full gauntlet of magic and spells available to him because he's more powerful. And I don't think we need to necessarily throw out the idea that he is still chasing a larger part of himself, because if it is true that his mother is blocking his larger magic, we all know that Wiccan is a very powerful warlock. Like, the little bit of magic that Teen has, if he is in fact Billy, is not at the level of Wiccan at this point. So my guess is Wanda is blocking that, maybe to keep him under the radar, keep him safe, make him able to blend in with non-magical people so that he is kept far away from kind of all of the things that could potentially be hazardous or dangerous to him. So if that's the truth, in trying to get more power, he's trying to tap into a piece of himself that I think he doesn't quite understand is missing, but he wants more of. And I think that can also still apply to his mother, to his brother, because in finding that magic, he's going to find out so much more about himself than he ever thought he would at the end of the Witch's Road.
It's almost like Captain Marvel, honestly, from what you were just saying, the whole I've been fighting with one hand tied behind my back mentality. I agree. I think the spell that it's not even just his name. It's everything. It's all of his history. Agatha cannot hear it. I would be intrigued to see if other people can. Is it because it's Agatha and Wanda, again, all of this is assumed, but Wanda is protecting him indirectly specifically by or from Agatha? Like, is that maybe why? but also maybe just from the witches in general, he's being protected because clearly he doesn't go throughout life and like is unable to tell people his real name.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a boyfriend. We see that. Clearly, we're not sitting here and this kid doesn't have a name to other people in his life. So is it the magical community? Is it Agatha specifically? I'm not sure yet, but I do think, to your point, he wants more power, but ironically, I think he has it. I think it's all there. And I actually, this is for theories, guys, right? Theories go flying, especially when it comes to like the WandaVision realm. But there's a still that's been going around, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I need to throw it out there while we're talking about this. There's a still that has been going around of Teen over top of what we now know are the doors to the Witch's Road. And it looks as if it's a circle with a star in the middle, and he's in the middle of it. It's a very distinctive Wiccan look, actually, if you look at the comics. And he's doing a spell over top of the door. And I don't know who they are or the username, but I'm shouting you out because I saw it. And somebody asked about it and was like, why is he trying to hold the door shut? What's he trying to keep out or whatever? And somebody was like, or what's he trying to keep in? And so I do wonder, throwing this all the way to the end of the series, if he finds out who his mother is, remembers Agatha, don't forget, Agatha kidnapped him when he was a child.
Yeah.
Or one of the versions of him as a child, his soul, technically, because that's its own thing. But like, he knows she's not a good witch. She does try to like pretty much murder his family. So I do wonder if by the end, not only does he unlock the power that his mother might be hiding from him to keep him safe, but he in the end is the one who stops Agatha from finishing the Witch's Road.
Yeah, or returning with the newfound power that she gained by finishing the Witch's Road.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Billy, Teen, whatever you want to call him, is going to come back from the Witch's Road with a lot more than just a little extra spice to his power. And I think that's going to be really what we're going to see is the birth of Wiccan, right? I mean, we talked in the predictions episode about how we see him as Teen / we're going to take a leap and call him Billy now, but he needs to go from Teen / Billy to Wiccan, and he's not there yet. But I think the road is going to be the vehicle that gets him there. And that's really exciting because now there are more. We obviously know Kate and Kamala are together and putting people together and forming a group. We've seen some of the others and some of the other properties, you know, and all of that can start to come together. And now this is just one more piece of the puzzle that this show is going to bring in and make available to us.
And he's not far. He's in New Jersey right now. That is where he is. So I love Agatha, but we have to remember she's a villain, and we'll get to that in 1 second. I actually am most intrigued by him. He, to me, is the driving force of this entire series, and he's the reason I'm tuning in the most, because I want to know where he's going next. I think I know who he is, but here we are. I mean, maybe Marvel's going to sit there and be like, actually, he's nobody you even thought of. Do I think that's true? No. I think we have a pretty solid prediction, and I think we're not the only ones out there, and I know we're not. So I do think we know who he is, but I'm there for how this series morphs him into the version of him we're waiting to see. But as for Agatha, obviously it would be pretty remiss if we didn't really get into the main character and the person named after the show. I love her. I always did. Even in WandaVision, like, yes, well, I have to say I never saw her becoming the villain. So the fact she did, that I remember being a mind-blowing thing for me. I think she's hilarious. Her one-liners keep it fresh. I mean, Catherine Hahn, I adore her. I mean, Parks and Rec. She was in Suburgatory way back when. That's how I really remember her. I really, really like her. Or I think she was in Suburgatory. Am I making that up?
I think she was.
Okay.
I feel good about that.
Okay, great. I also feel good about that, but someone can fact check me there. Either way, I really, really love her. And she does great as this character. But the reason I really want to get into her is, as I said, she's a villain. And she's still a villain. And what's so interesting is, I guess in tandem we can have this conversation, is Rio isn't technically the villain because the show's protagonist is the antagonist.
Yeah. And let's say it this way to simplify it. The show's protagonist is a villain, making her antagonist technically a good guy. Yeah. Now, let's talk about shades of gray, because I think there's
Right.
lots of them.
Yeah.
Right? Who are the Salem 7? I don't know. I haven't had the chance to do the research yet on that.
That looked horrible.
Yeah,
I mean, as a horror person, like, that was cool, but that looked horrible.
I know they're going to be back. I mean, that feels like that's coming back. That was the jump scare that got me when they reach in the window and get Teen. I was like, oh, no.
No. When she, like, weirdly came crawling down the stairs, like, threw herself down the stairs, I was
that
like,
was bad.
absolutely not. Like, y'all could have just walked. Like, what is this?
It was giving The Last of Us, and I'm, like, so happy traumatized from that show. Not happy, but, like, I love that show, yet am traumatized by it. So, yeah, no, there was, like, a lot going on. But the Salem 7, haven't done research yet, and we will, have that by our reactions to episode 3 on who they are potentially in the comics and what that could mean. But they seem to kind of be, if not Rio's superiors, then at least her colleagues in a very loose sense of the term. So who are they reporting to if she's not reporting to the Salem 7? At the end of the day, someone is trying to keep law and order in the magical realm. This isn't Doctor Strange or the Sorcerer Supreme's style, so it's not them. And I guess the question is, especially because Agatha, and obviously the Sorcerer Supreme is very ancient, so that mantle is old. But this whole thing seems to have started hundreds of years ago, and they have clearly been hunting her for a very, very long time. And now that she's powerless, they are actually able to go after her. So the question becomes, who is Rio working for? What is their end game other than to kill Agatha? And how does this all factor into essentially what is becoming a Wiccan origin story?
A few things to all the things you've said. First off, the Salem 7 is clearly an ancient entity. That shouldn't be a shock to anybody. I actually think, and now I have not watched this part of WandaVision specifically in a long time, but we know Agatha is from Salem. That's her origin. She takes the power of quite a few witches all at once when they are trying to kill her, including her mother. Now, I'm going to put on my little horror cap here, guys. If I was a horror person trying to create a show that has horror in it, I would say, and now again, I have not counted these witches. I don't know how many were there for a fact, but I would say, wouldn't it make a lot of sense that with the amount of magic, and because they're in Salem specifically, these are the ghosts of said maybe 7 witches that she stole the powers from and killed?
Yeah, I love that. I also think it would be interesting to understand with Agatha's powers, because she takes them from others, what does that leave? Like, what is the remnant, right? They seem dead, but what if that's just not quite, they're not fully dead, right? Is she creating demons? Is she creating some sort of other mythical creature through the siphoning of others' magic?
Okay, yes, you said she's a siphon, which is very important because I'm going off my Vampire Diaries kind of thought process. I'm not saying that's how Marvel's doing it, but I'm going off Vampire Diaries. My knowledge always was that the siphons can take others' powers to use it, but I don't think it normally killed them. And also, I don't remember them normally taking all of it. Like, I don't think that they had the ability to completely bring them dry of their powers. So I'm not sure if that's going to be the way Marvel goes, but from what I remember from Agatha's origin, she killed them. But the reason I want to say all this too is Rio kept saying something about killing a witch and how it pretty much seemed like witches cannot kill other witches, which is why Rio was not killing her. I wonder if that's part of why this is the way it is and why the Salem 7 are coming after her, because she killed all those witches.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like there are, to your point, like protections in place to keep witches from ending other witches' lives. But because of the nature of Agatha's magic, because the one thing that I've gotten from WandaVision, from the first 2 episodes of Agatha All Along, is that Agatha Harkness is incredibly powerful, and her ability to siphon others' magic is rare. It is not something that many, if any, other witches can do. That's why she was so protected is the wrong word, but like why she basically was untouchable for all those years, because if any witch came near her, all they had to do, to her point, was blast her with their magic and she could take their magic and kill them. And so I think what is interesting about what you were saying is if she's so rare and is one of very few able to actually kill another witch, then it takes some sort of other mythological magical entity to end her that's not another witch like Rio.
And that's why I wonder if it is the ghost or the remaining aura or whatever of the ones in which she killed initially. And I also think that would be a really smart callback. But again, I'm putting my horror cap on here, and that would make a lot of sense. They didn't look human to me. Last I checked, and granted, we don't get like the world's best view of them underneath their shawl thing or veil, but they don't look human.
Agreed.
They don't look, and also the whole like splitting thing, which that freaked me out.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed Herb was out there like, you seeing this too? Like, what is happening? he wanted to make sure he wasn't going insane. But I thought it was so interesting that you're watching this. I'm like, they're not human. So I think it could easily be that callback that she accidentally created these almost demons because she took the lives of those witches by taking their power. I mean, it's to be said that a lot of the times when a witch loses her power, it's a lifeline. So that's the other thing. For Agatha, she's not dead because her power is never really hers.
Yeah. It's always supplemented by someone else's.
Right. So I do think that's kind of where that's coming from. And then to tie into Rio, I do believe that there is probably this idea of you don't take another witch's life. That's just not really something. I mean, it's supposed to be, there's covens, right? And the whole idea of covens or sisterhood, they say it in the show. There isn't supposed to be this like animosity between the witches in that way that you would murder another witch. And by Agatha's just nature alone, as you even said, even when she wasn't trying to kill them initially. They were trying to take her life because of the type of witch she was. She was unnatural. And because she'd done other things is my assumption or what I remember. But she killed them because she is a siphon and they just depleted their power. She pretty much did to them what the Scarlet Witch did to her. But again, as a siphon, she can live without power. She doesn't have to have it.
Yes, because she's able to go back and basically get more under the right conditions.
Right.
I do want to talk about Rio and Agatha and the tension, because there is definitely some vibes and also clearly some history. Like, even when they were under the guise of the detectives, there was animosity on Agatha's side, but then when they were back to being their full selves and Agatha's fully aware of all of her history and everything, there were some serious vibes, and I want to know what happened. Obviously we're going to find out, but I definitely am intrigued by their history, those two characters.
Chapel Rowan just starts playing right here. I think there's some deep history between them from the scenes they shared together. Obviously, Rio's old. Clearly, she's known Agatha for a long time. I think this is going to be an interesting thing to dissect, that a lot of these individuals will have been around a lot longer than they appear to have been around because of witchcraft. So I do think that's going to be a very interesting thing that we also need to keep reminding ourselves, because it's not like, I know Aubrey Plaza is in her like 30s and 40s. Her character is hundreds of years old, I assume. Like, it's just what we have to kind of keep going back to. I am also very intrigued by the animosity, by the feelings that are clearly behind everything that's going on between the two of them. I love Rio. I'm excited for her to make her return, because obviously we see her in the first episode and then, well, and I think the beginning of the second, but then it's kind of like we go to the Witch's Road. Obviously she joins them at some point. But yes, there is quite a bit of tension between the two of them, and I am intrigued to see the history. Now, again, Rio, by our deduction, is a good guy. And let's not forget, and I wanted to bring this up so we don't forget, a lot of them have mentioned Agatha, and then she got the Darkhold. And it was mentioned by Rio, I'm pretty sure, and I believe it was mentioned by, and I'm still learning names, guys, but the potions
Jennifer Kale.
Yes, I think she also mentioned it. And if it wasn't her, it was the one who was doing the very first one.
The divination, that would have been Patti LuPone's character, whose name I can't currently remember.
Yes. It was one of those two, I'm pretty sure, had also mentioned, there was Agatha, and then she got her hands on the Darkhold, and that it was like over. Agatha was gone, and Agatha was doing her own thing, kind of whatever. So I really want to kind of more so understand, too, the timeline of events, because I'd also shout out to whoever had the amazing thought to burn the library books as representation of the fact that the Darkhold was destroyed in every universe. Amazing.
Also, the fact that the title of the book spelled out Darkhold, I was like, why are there so many layers to this? This is so smart. I was like, my brain was freaking out.
I mean, even down to the fact that they had, and actually, I really want to understand if Wanda's body did end up back in Westview. I do want to understand if that was like a real part of this storyline, because they even said the dirt under her fingernails was East Europe and all that stuff. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, hello?
Blunt force trauma?
Yeah. Is her body in Westview right now? Like, did it because we saw the blast at the end of MOM. Did it transport the body or her or the chaos magic or whatever indirectly transport that body back to Westview? Like, I have to know, because I'm sure remnants of the hex is still there. The magic of the hex has to still somewhat exist.
Well, her spell was still on Agatha, so clearly if it's going back to her magic, that's a live active spell.
Well, that's what I mean. I want to understand that so bad. I want to understand that, but I also really want to understand the timeline of Agatha's history. And, we did see in WandaVision her take the lives of those other witches by siphoning their magic. Where is that fall? Where's the Darkhold when she gets a hold of it? Where does all and again, you brought up her relationship with Rio. Where is that? Is that before? Is that after? Is that both? It seems like it's both. It seems like she's well aware that, or she knew Agatha before the Darkhold. And then as she got a hold of it, I mean, don't forget, guys, look what it did to Wanda. It warps the user's mind. So I really would like to explore that more. I'm really hoping we do. I'm sure we do. But that's the thing I'm looking most forward to.
Yeah, I definitely think that diving more into Agatha's background is going to be, one, super interesting, but two, super important. And it's going to be really great to give us, as an audience, background on the history of some very important magic users and the history of magic on North America, right? Like, Kamar-Taj is not based in North America. Obviously, we have a New York Sanctum, but the actual base itself is not in America or North America at all, as a continent for that matter. So it would be interesting to understand, outside of what we've seen in kind of the Ancient One and the Sorcerer Supreme, how magic has been evolving over the years. And Agatha seems like a very important person in that history of especially North American magic, given her history at, to your point, Salem with the Darkhold, one of the most powerful magical artifacts that has ever existed. So yeah, there's a lot of Agatha's history that I think is going to illuminate a lot of very important details as it relates to just the history of magic overall.
Yeah, I think so as well. I also want to bring up, since we've kind of talked about the Darkhold a little bit, maybe dispute this with me, but Teen had the darkness on his hands, and they said it was when she was in the detective, like under the spell, and they said it was from fingerprinting, but that would make sense inside the spell. The spell wouldn't have made it or allowed him to say what it was from. Do we think he was dabbling in dark magic?
I guess where I get stuck is there's a gap in my knowledge, right? Like, I don't know, do you get the darkened fingertips from dark magic in general or the Darkhold specifically? Because that changes my answer, right? If it's dark magic in general, sure. I mean, if he's trying any way he can to get more magic, I'm sure there's a million ways to do it with dark magic that are not going to be pleasant, and maybe he's run out of other options, hence why he's going to Agatha Harkness to go walk the witch's road. But if it's specifically tied to use of the Darkhold, well, this show has confirmed there is not a Darkhold copy to be found in the multiverse. So unless he's got the one surviving copy, which is unlikely, then my answer is just maybe it's even a precursor or like a hint that maybe we're going to see Wiccan teeter on the edge of dark magic at some point. Maybe it's just an Easter egg there. I don't know. I don't know enough about his history in the comics to know if he ever dabbles where his mother had in the dark magic realm and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of where my answer waffles depending on how you're viewing what actually causes the darkened fingertips.
I mean, that's fair. I just wanted to ask it because, again, it was under the spell, so they wrote it off as the fingerprinting thing. And maybe all it was reference to the fact that Wanda's hands, even the body, had the darkened fingertips. We saw that. So maybe it was just a reference. Maybe it was whatever. But guys, we have the WandaVision caps back on. We have the glasses on. Everything is a hint to something, right? That's how we have to view this. So I think my brain immediately is like, or does it mean something else?
And it totally could. It really, like I said, it depends on how they want to play that. And I don't think we know enough about dark magic to know quite yet. But I think this show is going to help us find out. I think one of the other mysteries that I've kind of been thinking about a lot is who is that last member of the coven that Agatha so badly didn't want part of it that she ate that piece of paper?
I think it's Rio.
Yeah, I think so too.
She needs a green witch, and we know Rio's a green witch. So I think she didn't want Rio to come, or I think it's one, she didn't want her to come, and two, I don't think she thought she would.
I don't disagree. I just wanted to make sure that you were also picking up the hints that it was Rio, because otherwise I was like starting to think about like what other magical characters could this be that would possibly be manipulated into being a part of Agatha's coven.
And two, the hint at it was a black heart, and Rio literally says her heart is black.
Okay.
In the first episode. So immediately you're like, yeah, because I'm pretty sure Agatha's like, you don't have a heart. She's like, yes, I do. It's just black, which I was like, that's such an Aubrey Plaza line that it wasn't even funny.
It really is.
But also, I'm living for the fact that those two are on Parks and Rec together. So they also have a small, tiny reunion. Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
At the premiere.
Yeah. So I'm like living for that low key as well. But yeah, I think it's 100% Rio. We also know she joins them on the road at some point. But what I want to circle back to is how did they manage to open the door with Mrs. Hart if she isn't a witch? Or if she specifically isn't a green witch?
I don't think she's a witch, period. To be honest, I don't think she is. Part of the reason I brought up the Rio question and the final member of the coven is because I wanted to have this conversation, because it was something that we focused so much on, not only in our predictions episode where we talked about the witches of the coven, but also in our predictions episode, like what's the point of having Mrs. Hart here other than Deborah Jo Rupp is a legend? And I think we now have the answer is just they wanted Deborah Jo Rupp because she's a legend, but Mrs. Davis / Mrs. Hart herself is not magical. She is just basically a placebo for Agatha to be able to tell the other witches that they have all of the ingredients that they need to walk the witch's road. That was my interpretation.
Can I say I might disagree?
Go for it.
I'm not sure I can even back myself up. But the one thing that WandaVision taught me was there's never just somebody thrown in there. And that everything is put together for a reason, even if you don't see it initially. I mean, there are things even on my second rewatch of WandaVision, on my third rewatch, I was seeing in the background that at the time I would have never thought of, but because now I know how things played out, I was like, holy crap, there's a whole Easter egg right there that never would have crossed my mind even on the first watch because I had no reason to think it was important. There is such a weird feeling inside of me to think that they brought this character specifically back to play a large role because she's not just a person in Westview. We saw the other neighbors. Dottie reappeared. Dottie's apparent husband, which I didn't realize they were married, reappeared. Like, we see the people that we knew in WandaVision, we were introduced to in WandaVision, reappear. They have their moment. So why is Mrs. Hart, or Sharon, I believe her first name is, why is Sharon the one coming with us? And again, I know the whole like placebo effect and your whole thing like convince the other witches, but didn't you need them all to sing the song? That was my understanding as well, was that we needed them all to sing the song. They all had to be part of the door, and now the door didn't open right away.
It actually didn't open until Teen came down.
True. So that's its own thing. Let's not even let's get into that in a second. But regardless, I'm almost wondering, I guess in my gut, I just can't feel like she's just there to be the comedic relief. Which she was, don't get me wrong. She was freaking hilarious.
She's so good. She's so good. I see what you're saying. I do. Just if we know that Rio's going to join and going to be the true Green Witch, what is her purpose? That's where I'm getting stuck.
Well, that's what I mean. And I guess I'm just stuck in general of like, what is her purpose in general?
Yeah.
We didn't need her there. That's why I'm constantly like, I should say I don't know if it's because she's a witch per se, but she's something important, I think. Because I just don't know why you brought her randomly back. I really don't. And again, she's walking the road. Like, it would have been one thing if she like, which I had to laugh when even Agatha was like, what does your heart tell you to do when like the scary demons are coming down? And she's just like, I don't really know if I should go. And Agatha's like, make a choice. Like, you're either running from the demon or you're not. But why is she coming with? And we knew she would probably come with from what we saw in the trailers, but it was like, she could have ran off to the side and got out of there and escaped. And I don't think the Salem 7 would have gone after her, considering one, she, to our knowledge, is human, and two, has no part of any of this. They're after Agatha. So I don't know why we need to bring her with. I'm just really stuck on that.
This is totally out of left field, and I have no reason why it's relevant, but she did mention her husband died.
I also clocked that.
Yeah, I'm like, to your point, in a series, based on a series, well, a sequel of a series where nothing was ever beyond scrutiny, I feel like that might come back and be important. I don't know why. I don't know how. But if we're going to go deep into conspiracy theories about Mrs. Hart/Davis, then let's do it. Like, then there's something with her husband dying. Did she kill her husband? I don't know. But I just wanted to put that out there too.
And I just want to put out there, something's not right with her. Her being involved in this, something's not right. Do I have any idea what it is? Absolutely freaking not. And whoever it is has been playing the long game. I mean, they may have accidentally gotten stuck in a witch's hex, or maybe on purpose. Nobody knows. But they already got stuck in a witch's hex. They're still living in the town right near Agatha, though. Whoever it is like almost keeping an eye on her.
Yeah.
So, and maybe we'll be completely wrong. Maybe episode 9 will roll around and we're going to sit there and it's not going to make any sense whatsoever. But at the end of the day, I just don't know why you brought her along. We would have been just fine without her. So it is pretty interesting. I also, the last shot, noticed they were all wearing boots, which is obviously the whole iconic witches wear boots. And I was trying to look at Mrs. Hart's shoes, and I couldn't tell if they were like kind of clog looking or if they were just little regular shoes.
I did not notice what her shoes look like.
No, I was hardcore assessing the shoes. But also, can a non-witch walk the road?
I don't know. I mean, Agatha was desperate and I think a little short-sighted because at one point or another, depending on how quickly Rio materializes on the road, the other witches are going to realize that old Mrs. Hart/Davis over here is not the witchy kind of quirky. She's just regular human kind of quirky.
Yeah.
Or very inept as a witch. In which case, that's not going to make Agatha's experience any more positive.
Yeah. Either way, it's going to come to a head, but I am intrigued because they have to take their shoes off. And to me, I was like, is that not entry? Like, once you got in there, is that not a symbolic way of saying, this is my way as a witch of entering this? So why is she allowed to walk the road?
I don't know. I'm going back to my human sacrifice theory from the predictions episode that now that she doesn't really have a function as a witch, to our knowledge, that she's just going to be sacrificed as collateral damage.
I don't know. I don't think she's human sacrifice, but I think something's up with her and we have to keep an eye on it. I don't know if it's her directly, but I feel like there's something more. Also, to be fair, even going all the way back, why was Deborah Jo Rupp put into such a tiny role? She's not a small actress. And if you look at her equivalents across WandaVision, that is Dottie, that is Herb, that is Dottie's husband, whose name I cannot remember. They're technically her equivalents. I don't know any of those actors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't know a single soul. Even her husband, who I don't even remember what he looks like, couldn't tell you who that man is. She's the only actress that was not part of the main group beyond, like, obviously the children, like the twins who appear and stuff, whatever, that I didn't recognize from other things, or that I did recognize from other things, but was playing a tinier role. Because she got brought back, it's just in my gut, something's going on here.
I think you make a really good point. I will be curious to see what's going to happen with her if that does come true. I mean, heck, maybe she's Mephisto in human form. Is there going to be an episode for this show that we're not going to say it? No, I'm going to toss it out at every corner because he lived through WandaVision, and I think he's going to live through this show, whether that's correct or incorrect. Mephisto is not going to be unnamed in any episode. I decree it.
Okay, guys, wait. Sorry, this is not related to Mrs. Hart, but this is related to what you said about Wiccan being the one that comes down. So and that's when the door opens, because I want to go back to that. That's very important to me. I did a quick little Google search, haha, lifetime. And it says, Wiccans are a type of witch who practice a nature-based pagan religion. So, nature-based is a green witch.
Yeah. Yep. That was her green witch and she didn't know it.
Shut up. That's so interesting. But that's also interesting because I guess he couldn't be. There's only literally one Scarlet Witch. Like, there's literally only the entity.
Correct. But it also could mean that Mrs. Hart / Davis is a straight up human because, again, the door didn't open until Wiccan came down. Well, Billy / Teen. Oh, so many names. But you get the gist.
I mean, it could theoretically, she still could be a different type of witch, just not necessarily one they needed for the road.
Fair.
Because again, like the Scarlet Witch exists out there, and I don't think you need her for the road. Well, you don't need her for the road. She's only one individual or one entity, but she exists out there. So it is possible she still could be a type of witch otherwise. But I just looked that up really quickly. Obviously, that's based off the whole like Wiccans as a thing, but that's why he is named Wiccan, I would assume. So at the end of the day, he very much could be a green witch then.
He totally could. I do actually want to put one point in your theory favor, which is that Mrs. Davis / Hart is found gardening. And so, again, with the nature.
When she talks about having a green thumb, which I know could very much be like written off, but it also could have been something else.
Not in this show.
Yeah, not in this show. Also, technically speaking, wouldn't Wiccan be a blood witch?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless, look, I guess, okay, here's another gap in magical knowledge in the MCU. Does being a blood witch matter more than the type of magic that you have? Unclear.
I don't know, but they needed a blood witch for the road, which they did get one. That was Alice. That was, it didn't have to be him. But I think it also says a lot when you're a blood witch because your mother's the Scarlet Witch, the most powerful witch in the multiverse.
And technically your soul only exists because she willed it into existence through chaos magic.
Yeah, which is its own other thing. I'm very intrigued about this little, like, they all have types of witches. Or, like, they're all types of, you know what I mean? And it's interesting, too, because it's like, Agatha makes the reference to being a purple witch. She said, I want my purple back.
Yeah.
So the colors are important here, more than just blood and whatever. But, like, the categories aren't all lining up, is kind of what I think I'm trying to say.
Well, totally, because obviously you have Scarlet, which is, right, Wanda, but then you also have like the folks at Comertage who all have yellow magic / orange, like that kind of burnt orange color. So what does that mean and what does that signify? Yeah.
That's clearly its own. That's Comertage tied though. So all those sorcerers are probably going to have that because they're that type of warlock / witch. That's their type of magic.
Pulling it directly from their being.
Yeah, so that is theirs. That's their category. But I guess I'm thrown off because you talk about having a green witch. And you do have Agatha, who talks about her purple, which might be because she's a siphon and that's kind of whatever. So she has her own color as well because she's a different type of witch. But then I'm like, okay, but then you have a blood witch. And then you're talking about, a potions witch and stuff like that.
And divination.
So you have like what they almost major in. But then you also have some that are like going off of color, like where they draw their magic from.
Well, I wonder if it's like one of those things where divination and potions are like a skill, right? Like that's
Right.
something that you have to hone with your magic versus I feel like Agatha's magic is more of like blunt force when she uses it. Even Wanda, she has the power of creation, but it's still physically out there. Whereas like Patty LaPone's character, whose name I still can't remember, she sees things.
Lilia?
Yes, Lilia Cardew or Cardew or something. Yes, good job. But you're not seeing a color or any sort of aura around her. She is physically seeing it. Even Jennifer, like when she's doing her thing, we didn't really see her totally in action, but I'm assuming we're not going to really see any color of magic. It's just going to be her skills with the potions. So I think there's almost different categories. It's like skill based magic versus natural born with magic. Not that the skill based folks are not, but it's just like how it appears to the recipient.
That's what I'm trying to understand. Like, I almost need a chart to be like, let's say Lilia, like, is she also, I don't know, like an orange witch? But we don't know that because she has her major, if you will, in divination. Like, what does that look like kind of thing? So, yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand is like, is it skill versus, I mean, the blood one makes sense to me. She is like a second generation witch.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that makes sense. But it is interesting to circle it all back because, again, we could go into a hole here. And until somebody creates me something that makes sense to my mind, I'm not understanding the difference between how some have color and some don't. Like some seem to be based off their skill. So that's something I hope we explore a little further. But to circle it all back, Teen theoretically is both a green witch based off of his name that we believe him to take later on, which is Wiccan. And also the door didn't appear until he showed up. And he technically should be a blood witch or warlock as well.
Correct. Yes. Based on the definition that we were given in the show and Alice. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
That's what I'm also understanding.
So we'll have to see. This whole show to me is based off of him. I know it's Agatha All Along, but everything to me drives off of him.
Well, yeah, to me, this is the Wiccan origin story. Like, that's really what the function of this show is going to be. Like, Agatha's cool. I love her. She's entertaining. But at the end of the day, what is the goal of the show? To prepare him for the Young Avengers that we are now confirmed to be forming. Period. The end.
And to introduce us to more witches. We're clearly going to be exploring that realm for a reason.
For sure. For sure. But on that note, kind of looking forward to what we think this show might do moving into the rest of the season or the rest of the series, because I think it's confirmed to be a mini series. So I think we're just getting the one season. But we are going to call it wraps on our reactions to episodes 1 and 2. Please make sure that you are following on your podcast platform of choice so that you can follow along with us as we go week by week in a more timely manner to cover the rest of the series as it comes out. You can also check out our website. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, check out our Buy Me a Coffee link, where if you would feel so inclined, you can support the show if that's something you'd like to do.
You guys can also follow us on all of our socials, which are linked below, along with our YouTube, where you guys can also access our Sister Scoop weekly news segments. We highly recommend go watching those. We pick 3 main topics of Marvel and we talk about them in the news for that cycle. So go ahead and check us out on all of those platforms. And we will see you guys next week for the next episode of Agatha All Along, episode 3. We hope you guys are loving it. And as always, keep up with Marvel and with us because Marvel just blew your mind. So let's talk about it.